20. Secretly black gay celebrities. What if some of the most legendary black icons you admire were carrying powerful secrets the world wasn't ready to hear? Behind the fame, awards, and applause, many of these stars lived double lives, forced to hide their truth in a world that judged them for both their skin and their love. From groundbreaking writers to chart-topping singers and fearless activists, their stories reveal a side of history rarely told. Are you ready to uncover the hidden lives of 20 secretly gay black celebrities? Buckle up, hit that like button, and subscribe now to Legends of Black Excellence. James Baldwin. James Baldwin's life was one of brilliance and burden, a paradox that defined his existence as both a celebrated intellectual and a black gay man in mid-20th century America. Born on August 2, 1924 in Harlem, New York, Baldwin grew up in poverty, the eldest of 9 children. His childhood was shaped by the harsh realities of racial segregation and the stern hand of his stepfather, a preacher whose rigid religiosity often clashed with Baldwin's sensitive, questioning nature. This tension gave birth to Go Tell It on the Mountain, 1953, his semi-autobiographical debut novel where religion, family, and identity were dissected with unflinching honesty. From the very beginning, Baldwin used literature as both weapon and shield. By the mid-1950s, Baldwin had emerged as one of the most important voices of his generation. His collection, Notes of a Native Son, 1955, offered searing essays on race, culture, and politics, establishing him as a public intellectual capable of diagnosing America's sickness with words sharper than any blade. Yet it was his groundbreaking novel Giovanni's Room, 1956, that cemented his courage. Writing explicitly about same-sex desire, Baldwin took a daring leap, especially as a black man in an era when homosexuality was criminalized and silence was expected. Many publishers warned him that the book could end his career, but Baldwin insisted, "If I don't write the book, it would be dishonest." In doing so, he created one of the earliest modern classics of queer literature. Throughout the 1960s, Baldwin stood shoulder to shoulder with Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and Medgar Evers. Yet he was never simply a follower. His speeches and essays exposed the hypocrisies of American democracy and the insidiousness of white supremacy. Unlike some of his contemporaries, Baldwin articulated how racism and homophobia were interwoven systems of oppression, eroding the humanity of everyone they touched. He often reminded audiences that liberation for black people could not be complete without acknowledging the full spectrum of identity, including sexuality. Do you think Baldwin's insistence on linking race and sexuality made his activism ahead of its time? In later years, Baldwin found refuge in France, where he lived much of his adult life. Exile provided him the freedom to write without the constant weight of American prejudice, though he never abandoned his homeland emotionally. Works such as The Fire Next Time, 1963, and If Beale Street Could Talk, 1974, continued to blend love, rage, and unyielding truth. Hollywood adapted If Beale Street Could Talk into an Academy Award-winning film in 2018, proof of Baldwin's enduring relevance decades after his death. Baldwin passed away on December 1, 1987 from stomach cancer, but his influence has only grown. His essays are taught in classrooms across the world. His speeches circulate online as rallying cries for justice. His novels remain touchstones of both African American and queer identity. In a world still grappling with racism and homophobia, Baldwin's words ring prophetic. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. His courage to live, write, and love authentically has transformed him into not just a literary figure, but a moral compass for generations. Carl Bean. Carl Bean's story is one of music ministry and unapologetic authenticity. Born on May 26, 1944 in Baltimore, Maryland, he faced adversity early in life. Orphaned as a teenager, Bean found solace in music and the church, two worlds that would ultimately define his legacy. He began his career singing gospel before moving into Motown's orbit in Los Angeles during the 1970s. But it wasn't until 1977 that he became a cultural force. That year, he recorded "I Was Born This Way," a disco anthem declaring queer self-acceptance at a time when few dared to sing openly about same-sex love. The song predated Lady Gaga's hit of the same name by decades, and for many in the LGBTQ+ community, especially Black queer listeners, it became a lifeline of representation. Bean's voice carried both power and tenderness, but his artistry was never confined to the stage. Deeply spiritual, he answered a calling that seemed impossible in his time, merging Christianity with queer identity. In 1982, he founded the Unity Fellowship Church movement in Los Angeles, the first Black church created specifically for LGBTQ+ congregants. Its motto, "God is love, and love is for everyone," defied centuries of exclusion and created a sanctuary where queer believers could worship without fear. Within a decade, the movement grew into a national network of churches, saving countless lives from despair and giving visibility to those once silenced by both society and the pulpit. Beyond the pulpit, Bean was a fierce advocate in the fight against HIV/AIDS. As the epidemic devastated communities in the 1980s, disproportionately affecting Black men, Bean led outreach efforts, founded support initiatives, and comforted the marginalized. He understood that battling the disease required dismantling stigma as much as providing care. His activism echoed through nonprofits and health programs that directly impacted thousands. How powerful is it when one person chooses to transform their pain into a platform that heals an entire community? Recognition of Bean's contributions came later in life, but it was profound. His autobiography, "I Was Born This Way," 2010, chronicled his journey of resilience, faith, and advocacy. In 2019, Los Angeles declared May 26th, Archbishop Carl Bean Day, honoring his decades of service to equality. Though he passed away on September 7th, 2021, his impact remains tangible in the churches he founded, the lives he uplifted, and the song that continues to play as a declaration of pride. Carl Bean's legacy reminds us that queerness and spirituality are not contradictions, but expressions of the same divine truth. He dared to unite gospel and disco scripture and self-love, community and resistance. At a time when many were forced into silence, Bean sang, preached, and fought loudly, leaving behind a blueprint for living authentically. His life is a testament that freedom, faith, and love are inseparable, and that being born this way is not just a lyric, but a revolution. Luther Vandross. Luther Vandross's voice was velvet smooth and flawless, the kind that could melt heartbreak into poetry. Born on April 20th, 1951 in New York City, Vandross grew up in a musical household where creativity was encouraged despite the challenges of poverty. His early influences included Dionne Warwick and Aretha Franklin, and by the late 1960s, he was working as a background vocalist for icons such as David Bowie, Chaka Khan, and Roberta Flack. Vandross's big break came in 1981 with his debut solo album, Never Too Much, which went platinum almost instantly. From that moment, he became the soundtrack of love for a generation, selling over 40 million records worldwide and winning 8 Grammy Awards, including 4 in a single night in 2004. Despite his immense fame, Vandross's personal life was a closely guarded secret. Rumors about his sexuality swirled for decades, particularly in an era when being openly gay could derail an R&B career. Friends and collaborators have since acknowledged that Vandross was gay, but chose privacy both out of fear and out of a deep desire to keep the focus on his music. His romantic ballads like Here and Now, A House Is Not a Home, and Dance with My Father take on an even deeper resonance when viewed through that lens. They weren't just love songs, they were coded expressions of longing written by a man who often could not live his truth openly. Does knowing the reality behind the singer make his music more powerful for you? Or does it change how you hear his lyrics? Vandross's influence went beyond his solo career. He collaborated with industry legends including Diana Ross, Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey, and Beyoncé, often serving as a mentor. His impeccable arrangements and emotional delivery reshaped R&B, making ballads commercially viable in an age dominated by funk and disco. He was also a perfectionist, rehearsing endlessly to achieve the flawless sound that defined his legacy. In 2003, Vandross suffered a severe stroke that left him unable to perform, and his health declined afterward. His final public gift to fans was the album Dance with My Father, which won the Grammy for Song of the Year in 2004 and remains one of the most moving tributes to family ever recorded. On July 1, 2005, Vandross passed away at just 54 years old, leaving a void in music that has never truly been filled. Vandross's name evokes elegance, romance, and a sense of timeless artistry. His songs still dominate wedding playlists, his influence still echoes in younger artists, and his story continues to remind us of the cost of living in the shadows. Luther Vandross may have kept parts of himself private, but through music he revealed a soul filled with yearning tenderness and truth. His legacy proves that while the man may have been hidden, the voice was always honest. RuPaul Charles. RuPaul Andre Charles, born on November 17, 1960 in San Diego, California, is more than just a drag performer. He is a cultural architect who redefined entertainment fashion and queer visibility. Growing up in a turbulent household, RuPaul sought refuge in performance and self-expression, eventually moving to Atlanta during his teenage years before settling in New York City in the 1980s. There, in the gritty East Village art scene, he crafted a persona of bold wigs, glamorous gowns, and unapologetic charisma. His breakthrough came in 1993 with the infectious hit single supermodel You Better Work, which soared on the Billboard charts and turned RuPaul into the first drag queen to achieve mainstream stardom. The success of that song led to television appearances, commercials, and even his own talk show on VH1. Yet RuPaul's most enduring creation would arrive years later, RuPaul's Drag Race, which debuted in 2009. The competition series brought drag from underground clubs into millions of living rooms. Over more than a decade, the franchise has expanded into international spin-offs, earning 29 Emmy Awards, the most for any black artist in Emmy history. Through witty catchphrases like "Sashay away" and "Shantae you stay," RuPaul built a language of empowerment that resonates worldwide. But beneath the sequins and lip-sync battles lies something deeper: the validation of queer artistry as a legitimate cultural force. While fame made him a household name, RuPaul's journey was not without criticism. Some argued that his focus on glamorized drag left out parts of the queer community. Yet he consistently emphasized that drag is about transformation, resilience, and self-love. His memoir, Lettin' It All Hang Out, 1995, and later writings reveal a philosophy centered on authenticity. We're all born naked, and the rest is drag. Isn't it fascinating how one person's artistry can shift an entire culture's perception of gender and identity? Beyond the runway, RuPaul has acted in films like To Wong Fu Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar, and lent his voice to animated shows while continuing to release music albums. He has also used his platform to speak about mental health, spirituality, and the power of reinvention. His image as both drag queen and businessman demonstrates the balance of art and commerce, showing future generations of queer performers that success does not require hiding who they are. RuPaul's legacy is monumental. He didn't just elevate drag, he normalized it, turning what was once taboo into a celebrated art form. Millions of viewers, gay, straight, and everything in between, now tune in to watch performers lip-sync, sew, and strut for the crown. His influence has inspired a new wave of drag artists, influencers, and activists around the world. RuPaul Charles is proof that visibility can change history. He took an art form once relegated to the shadows and made it sparkle in the spotlight. For countless queer people, especially black performers, his success is both a mirror and a beacon, showing them not only who they are, but who they can become. Sylvester James. Sylvester James Jr., born on September 6, 1947 in Los Angeles, California, was a visionary artist who embodied freedom, flamboyance, and fierce authenticity. Known mononymously as Sylvester, he carved out a legacy in music that remains unmatched, earning the title Queen of Disco. Raised in a devout Pentecostal family, Sylvester discovered his love for gospel as a child, but the rigidity of the church clashed with his gender non-conforming self. By his teenage years, he had left home embracing the drag and queer performance scene in San Francisco's Tenderloin district. It was here that Sylvester would begin to shape his identity both musically and personally, unafraid of living openly as a gay man. His breakthrough came in the 1970s when disco dominated dance floors worldwide. With his powerhouse falsetto and electric stage presence, Sylvester released the hit single You Make Me Feel Mighty Real in 1978, a track that soared into the Billboard charts and became an anthem of queer liberation. At a time when many artists concealed their sexuality, Sylvester performed in glittering gowns, sequins, and makeup, proudly merging his artistry with his truth. His music, which also included hits like Do You Wanna Funk, wasn't just entertainment, it was affirmation. For Black LGBTQ+ people, his success sent a powerful message: you could be yourself and still shine. Do you think the courage of performers like Sylvester paved the way for today's artists to live more authentically? But Sylvester's influence extended beyond music. He was deeply involved in the San Francisco queer community, particularly as the HIV/AIDS crisis began devastating lives in the early 1980s, long before many celebrities acknowledged the epidemic. Sylvester used his platform to raise awareness, perform at benefit concerts, and support those who were stigmatized. His unapologetic presence in both art and activism helped create visibility for queer people of color at a time when silence was the norm. Commercially, Sylvester sold millions of records worldwide, collaborated with major producers, and headlined international tours. Yet what truly set him apart was his ability to blur boundaries. He refused to conform to traditional notions of masculinity or femininity, instead presenting himself as a kaleidoscope of both. This defiance of norms made him a trailblazer not only in disco, but in the broader cultural movement toward acceptance and gender fluidity. Tragically, Sylvester's life was cut short when he died from AIDS-related complications on December 16, 1988, at just 41 years old. In his final years, he continued performing despite his declining health, even arranging for his royalties to support AIDS charities after his death. His funeral, held at his San Francisco church, was a vibrant celebration of music and identity, filled with disco anthems rather than somber hymns. Sylvester's legacy remains alive on dance floors around the world. You Make Me Feel Mighty Real is still considered one of the greatest dance tracks of all time, and his boldness continues to inspire drag performers, queer musicians, and activists. He proved that art can be both dazzling and defiant, that one voice can spark joy while demanding justice. In glitter and falsetto, Sylvester gave the world freedom, and that is why he will always be remembered as Mighty Real. Bill T. Jones. Bill T. Jones, born on February 15, 1952, in Bunnell, Florida, is one of the most transformative figures in American dance and theater. As the 10th of 12 children in a working-class migrant family, Jones grew up surrounded by hardship, but also by the rhythms of storytelling and song. His earliest experiences of creativity were tied to survival and expression, and by the time he reached college, his passion for dance had crystallized into a calling. At the State University of New York at Binghamton, he met Arnie Zane, a fellow artist who would become his romantic partner, creative collaborator, and co-founder of one of the most influential dance companies in the world. In 1982, Jones and Zane established the Bill T. Jones-Arnie Zane Dance Company, which quickly gained a reputation for blending athleticism, narrative, and social commentary. Their choreography was not merely movement, it was protest poetry and philosophy embodied. Works like Still Here, 1994, incorporated testimonies from people living with terminal illnesses, blending dance with real human stories. Critics were divided. Some called it too political, others called it groundbreaking. But Jones never wavered. For him, art was a weapon against silence, a mirror reflecting issues of race, sexuality, illness, and mortality. How do you feel about art that confronts audiences with uncomfortable truths? Does it challenge you or push you away? Jones's openness about his sexuality and his relationship with Zayn marked him as a rare figure in the 1980s, especially as the AIDS epidemic ravaged the queer community. When Zayn tragically died of AIDS-related complications in 1988, Jones faced personal devastation. Yet he chose resilience, continuing to lead the company they had built together while honoring Zayn's memory in his choreography. His work became even more infused with themes of lost identity and love, resonating deeply with audiences navigating grief and stigma. Over the decades, Jones has accumulated accolades that confirm his status as a giant in the arts. He is a recipient of the MacArthur Genius Grant, 2 Tony Awards for choreographing Spring Awakening 2007 and Fella 2010, and the Kennedy Center Honors in 2010. These achievements reflect not just his mastery of dance, but also his ability to expand what performance can achieve. By weaving multimedia elements, spoken word, and provocative imagery into his choreography, Jones created a new language of movement that inspired countless dancers and choreographers. Beyond performance, Jones has become an educator and advocate. He speaks frequently about the necessity of creativity in addressing social inequities, urging younger generations to see art as a vehicle for change. His leadership extends to his role as artistic director of New York Live Arts, where he continues to foster innovation and dialogue in contemporary performance. Bill T. Jones is more than a dancer. He is a storyteller who uses the body as a canvas for humanity's deepest struggles and triumphs. His art confronts prejudice, celebrates difference, and insists that beauty can emerge even from pain. For queer Black artists, he represents both visibility and possibility, proof that authenticity and brilliance can coexist in the spotlight. Through movement, Jones has taught the world that dance is not just entertainment, it is revolution. Wanda Sykes. Wanda Sykes, born on March 7, 1964 in Portsmouth, Virginia, is one of the sharpest comedic voices of her generation. Raised in a middle-class family, her father worked at the Pentagon, and her mother was a banker. Sykes grew up in an environment that valued discipline and education. She earned a degree in marketing from Hampton University and began her professional life with the National Security Agency. But corporate work could not contain her wit, and by her late 20s, she was performing stand-up comedy on local stages, sharpening a style that blended biting satire with personal honesty. Her big break came in the 1990s when she was hired as a writer for The Chris Rock Show. Her contributions earned her an Emmy Award in 1999, and soon she became a performer on the show, delivering commentary that was equal parts hilarious and fearless. From there, Sykes' career skyrocketed. She appeared in hit sitcoms like Curb Your Enthusiasm and The New Adventures of Old Christine, voiced animated characters in films such as Ice Age Continental Drift, and headlined her own comedy specials. Her ability to blend personal stories with broader social critique made her stand out in a crowded comedy landscape. What sets Sykes apart is her fearless approach to identity. In 2008, during a rally supporting marriage equality in Las Vegas, she publicly came out as a lesbian just days after California voters passed Proposition 8, which banned same-sex marriage. At a time when many celebrities still hesitated to reveal their sexuality, Sykes' announcement was bold and personal. She later married her wife, Alex, with whom she is raising twins. Her openness gave visibility to Black queer women who rarely saw themselves reflected in mainstream comedy. How important is it, in your view, for entertainers to use their platform to stand up for their truth, even when it risks their career? Her comedy often tackles issues of race, sexuality, and politics head-on. In specials like I'ma Be Me and Not Normal, she skewered hypocrisy in American culture, challenged racial double standards, and made audiences laugh while forcing them to think. This balance of humor and activism has earned her respect not only from fans, but also from her peers. In 2020, she received the Primetime Emmy for Outstanding Variety Special pre-recorded as part of the producing team for the Chris Rock Tambourine Special. Beyond the stage and screen, Sykes has become an outspoken advocate for LGBTQ+ rights and racial justice. She has lent her voice to campaigns spoken at rallies and consistently used her celebrity to highlight inequality. While many comedians avoid politics, Sykes leans into it, understanding that laughter can disarm resistance and open the door to serious conversations. Wanda Sykes' journey is a testament to resilience, talent, and authenticity. From government worker to Emmy-winning comedian, from closeted performer to proud activist, she has refused to be limited by expectation or fear. She proves that comedy isn't just about jokes, it's about courage, perspective, and creating space for voices often ignored. For audiences worldwide, Wanda Sykes is more than a comedian. She is a truth-teller who makes us laugh while reminding us of what matters most. Bessie Smith. Bessie Smith, born on April 15, 1894 in Chattanooga, Tennessee, became one of the most iconic voices of the 20th century and earned the title Empress of the Blues. Her childhood was marked by tragedy. She lost both parents before the age of 10 and grew up in poverty. Singing on the streets with her siblings for coins, she quickly discovered that her voice had the power to stop people in their tracks. By her late teens, Smith had joined traveling vaudeville shows, learning stagecraft and showmanship that would define her legendary career. In 1923, she signed with Columbia Records, releasing her first hit, Downhearted Blues, which sold more than 750,000 copies in its first year, an astounding figure at the time. This catapulted her to national fame, making her the highest-paid black entertainer of the 1920s. Over the next decade, she recorded more than 160 tracks, including classics like St. Louis Blues, Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out, and Backwater Blues. Her contralto voice was powerful, raw, and emotional, capturing the struggles and resilience of African Americans in an era of segregation and hardship. Yet Smith's life was never just about music. It was also about breaking barriers. Known for her unapologetic personality, she openly pursued relationships with both men and women. This aspect of her life, rarely discussed in her time, has since been confirmed by biographers who note her affairs with female performers in the vaudeville circuit. In an era when same-sex love was stigmatized and often criminalized, Smith lived her truth with remarkable boldness. Do you think her refusal to hide her personal life makes her an even greater pioneer, not only in music but also in social history? Her influence extended beyond personal courage. She mentored younger artists like Louis Armstrong, with whom she collaborated on the famous recording of St. Louis Blues in 1925. She also brought blues music into the mainstream, influencing jazz, R&B, and even rock decades later. Without Bessie Smith, there would arguably be no Billie Holiday, no Janis Joplin, and no Aretha Franklin. The lineage of emotionally raw powerhouse vocalists begins with her. Despite her success, Smith's career was impacted by the Great Depression, when the recording industry collapsed and opportunities for performers dwindled. She continued to tour often to segregated audiences, but maintained her reputation as a commanding stage presence. Her career was tragically cut short on September 26, 1937, when she died from injuries sustained in a car accident in Mississippi at just 43 years old. Rumors that she was denied treatment at a whites-only hospital added to the legend of her untimely death, though historians later clarified the story. Bessie Smith's legacy endures. In 1989, she was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and her music continues to be reissued, studied, and celebrated. She remains a symbol of resilience, artistry, and authenticity, a woman who sang not just notes, but the raw essence of life itself. Her fearless embrace of who she was on and off stage ensures that she is remembered not only as the Empress of the Blues, but also as a pioneer who lived defiantly ahead of her time. Josephine Baker. Josephine Baker, born Frida Josephine McDonald on June 3, 1906 in St. Louis, Missouri, rose from poverty to become one of the most dazzling stars of the 20th century. Her early life was harsh. She worked as a maid by age 8 and left school by 12, often facing racism and abuse. Yet she discovered dance as her escape, joining vaudeville troupes as a teenager and bringing her comic timing and expressive movement to stages across America. By 1925, she had moved to Paris, where she became an overnight sensation in the show La Revue Nègre, performing in her now famous banana skirt. In a city that idolized jazz and exoticism, Baker became a symbol of the jazz age, the embodiment of glamour, humor, and freedom. Her stardom was unprecedented. She starred in silent films, headlined cabarets, and became one of the highest-paid performers in Europe. Baker was also openly affectionate with both men and women, engaging in relationships that defied the conservative norms of her time. Though she never labeled herself, historians agree that she embraced bisexuality, challenging ideas of sexuality decades before mainstream acceptance. Would you consider Josephine Baker's unapologetic approach to love and art as radical bravery, or simply a refusal to be defined by others' expectations? Her life, however, was far more than glittering costumes and applause. During World War II, Baker joined the French resistance, smuggling intelligence hidden in her sheet music and using her celebrity to gather critical information. For her bravery, she received the Croix de Guerre and the Legion of Honor from the French government. At the same time, she refused to perform for segregated audiences in the United States, standing firm against racial injustice. When Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his "I Have a Dream" speech in 1963, Baker was the only official female speaker at the March on Washington, dressed proudly in her French military uniform. Baker also used her personal life as a platform for activism. She adopted 12 children from different ethnic backgrounds, calling them her Rainbow Tribe. She raised them together at her estate in France to demonstrate that people of all races could live in harmony. This act, while sometimes criticized as theatrical, underscored her lifelong belief in equality and love across boundaries. Though her popularity waned after the 1950s, Baker never stopped performing. In 1975, at the age of 68, she staged a triumphant comeback show in Paris, drawing international acclaim once again. Tragically, just days later, she suffered a cerebral hemorrhage and passed away on April 12, 1975. Her funeral drew over 20,000 mourners, and she became the first American-born woman to receive full French military honors. Josephine Baker's story is that of a performer, a lover, a spy, and a civil rights pioneer. She used the stage not just to entertain, but to challenge, to resist, and to imagine a better world. More than 4 decades after her death, her influence endures in music, fashion, activism, and queer history. Baker proved that a black woman from Missouri could not only conquer Paris, but also reshape how the world thought about race, gender, and freedom. E. Lynn Harris. Everett Lynn Harris, widely known as E. Lynn Harris was born on June 20, 1955 in Flint, Michigan, and raised in Little Rock, Arkansas. His early years were marked by struggle. He endured bullying for his effeminate mannerisms and wrestled with a deep sense of isolation as a young black gay man in the South. Despite these challenges, Harris excelled academically and earned a degree in journalism from the University of Arkansas in 1977. He later became the school's first black yearbook editor, foreshadowing the trailblazing path he would take in literature. After college, Harris worked as a computer salesman, but his true passion remained storytelling. In the early 1990s, Harris began self-publishing his first novel, Invisible Life, a semi-autobiographical tale about a successful black lawyer coming to terms with his sexuality. Initially rejected by numerous publishers, Harris sold copies out of the trunk of his car. The book struck a chord with readers who had never seen their own lives reflected on the page, especially black gay men whose experiences had long been silenced. Eventually picked up by Anchor Books in 1994, Invisible Life became a bestseller and launched Harris into literary stardom. Over the next 2 decades, Harris published 11 consecutive novels that made the New York Times bestseller list, including Just As I Am, 1994, If This World Were Mine, 1997, and I Say a Little Prayer, 2006, His works often explored the down-low phenomenon, the hidden relationships of black men who loved men, but presented themselves as straight due to cultural and familial pressures. Harris's characters were successful, complex, and deeply human, challenging stereotypes that had long plagued depictions of black gay men in literature and media. How important is it for readers to see their own identities reflected in books? And can fiction be just as powerful as activism? Harris's writing didn't just entertain, it created community. His novels sparked national conversations about race, sexuality, masculinity, and faith. For many readers, his books were their first safe encounter with LGBTQ+ themes in a black cultural context. Beyond novels, Harris also wrote a moving memoir, What Becomes of the Brokenhearted, 2003, in which he candidly shared his struggles with depression, loneliness, and self-acceptance. His openness resonated with those who faced similar battles in silence. As Harris's career soared, he also gave back as a mentor and teacher. He served as a visiting professor at his alma mater, the University of Arkansas, and encouraged young writers to embrace their voices. His visibility and success proved that stories once thought too niche could in fact reach a mainstream audience and change the landscape of American literature. Tragically, Harris's life ended suddenly on July 23, 2009, when he died of heart disease at the age of 54. The literary world mourned the loss of a pioneer who had broken barriers and given voice to marginalized experiences. His influence, however, lives on through the countless readers who found courage, comfort, and pride in his words. E. Lynn Harris's legacy is profound. He showed that love in all its forms deserved to be written, celebrated, and shared. His novels remain a cornerstone of contemporary black literature and a testament to the power of telling the truth even when the world isn't ready to hear it. Bayard Rustin. Bayard Rustin, born on March 17, 1912 in Westchester, Pennsylvania, was one of the most brilliant organizers of the American Civil Rights Movement, yet for decades his contributions remained overshadowed. Raised by his grandparents, Rustin was deeply influenced by his Quaker upbringing, which instilled in him values of nonviolence and social justice. From an early age, he embraced activism, joining movements against segregation and injustice long before the Civil Rights Movement reached national prominence. In the 1940s, Rustin became a leading voice in pacifist circles. He studied the philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi, traveling to India to learn firsthand about nonviolent resistance. This knowledge would prove vital in shaping the tactics of the U.S. civil rights struggle. When Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. emerged as a national figure in the 1950s, it was Rustin who guided him in adopting nonviolence as the cornerstone of the movement. Rustin's ability to strategize, mediate conflicts, and unify diverse groups made him indispensable. His most famous achievement came in 1963 when he served as the chief organizer of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, the event where King delivered his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech. The march drew over 250,000 participants and remains one of the largest demonstrations in American history. Rustin coordinated everything from transportation to security, proving his genius for logistics and coalition building. Yet despite this historic accomplishment, his name was often excluded from the spotlight. Why? Because Rustin was openly gay in an era when homosexuality was stigmatized as a crime and a moral failing. Do you think history would have remembered Rustin differently if society had been more accepting of LGBTQ+ identities at that time? Throughout his career, Rustin faced discrimination not just for being black, but also for being gay. Political opponents used his sexuality to discredit him and undermine the movement. Even within the civil rights community, some leaders distanced themselves from him to avoid controversy. Despite this marginalization, Rustin never stopped working. He turned his attention to global human rights, labor rights, and the fight against poverty, continuing to advocate for justice until the end of his life. In later decades, Rustin's contributions began to receive the recognition they deserved. He advised on issues of international democracy, protested apartheid in South Africa, and worked on initiatives for economic equality in the United States. After his death on August 24, 1987, at the age of 75, activists and historians increasingly acknowledged the depth of his influence. In 2013, President Barack Obama posthumously awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor, finally securing his place in the pantheon of American heroes. Bayard Rustin's story is both inspiring and sobering. He was a man of extraordinary intellect and conviction who helped change the course of history, yet his identity relegated him to the shadows. His life reminds us that true progress must embrace all voices, not just the ones society finds comfortable. Today, his example continues to inspire activists who understand that intersectionality, the recognition of overlapping struggles of race, gender, and sexuality, is essential in the ongoing fight for justice. Audre Lorde. Audre Lorde, born on February 18, 1934 in New York City, to Caribbean immigrant parents, became one of the most uncompromising and fearless voices of the 20th century. She described herself with a litany of identities: Black, lesbian, mother, warrior, poet, each word a deliberate act of resistance against a world that often sought to silence her. Growing up in Harlem, Lorde discovered poetry as a young girl reciting verses before she could fully read. Writing became her sanctuary, a means to process her sense of difference and her longing for connection. Lorde's early collections, such as Cole, 1976, and The Black Unicorn, 1978, announced her arrival as a poet, unafraid to confront race, sexuality, and gender. Her lines were unflinching, filled with anger when necessary, but always infused with love for truth. Later, her essay collection, Sister Outsider, 1984, became a landmark text exploring the intersections of racism, sexism, homophobia, and classism. In it, she reminded readers that silence is never neutral. Your silence will not protect you. This became a rallying cry for marginalized people who had been told to stay quiet for survival. Do you believe silence in the face of oppression is complicity, or can it ever be a form of survival? As a lesbian Black feminist, Lorde often found herself at odds with both mainstream feminism and traditional Black movements. She criticized white feminists for ignoring race while also challenging Black communities for neglecting issues of gender and sexuality. For Lorde, true liberation could never be partial. It demanded an embrace of all forms of identity and difference. This vision made her a central figure in the development of intersectional thought years before the term itself became popularized. Her activism extended beyond writing. She co-founded Kitchen Table Women of Color Press, the first U.S. publisher devoted to women of color, amplifying voices long excluded from literature. She taught at universities across the country, mentoring young activists and writers who would continue her work. Lorde also lived with breast cancer for more than a decade, chronicling her battle in the Cancer Journal's 1980. In these writings, she insisted that illness too was political, urging women to resist medical silencing and reclaim their bodies. Lorde's impact was recognized worldwide. She became Poet Laureate of New York from 1991 to 1992, and her works were translated into numerous languages. Yet even with such accolades, her greatest legacy lies in the way her words continue to ignite courage. In classrooms, activist circles, and queer spaces, her poetry still challenges readers to confront the uncomfortable truths about inequality and the necessity of embracing difference. On November 17, 1992, Audre Lorde passed away in St. Croix, where she had spent her final years. She referred to herself as a Black lesbian feminist mother warrior poet until the very end, refusing to dilute any part of her identity. Her life and art remind us that poetry is not just beauty, it is resistance, survival, and revolution. Angela Davis. Angela Yvonne Davis, born on January 26, 1944 in Birmingham, Alabama, grew up in what was grimly known as Dynamite Hill because of the frequent bombings by white supremacists targeting Black families. From a young age, She was surrounded by injustice, and this environment shaped her into one of the most radical and fearless thinkers of her time. Bright and determined, Davis excelled academically, eventually studying philosophy in Europe under Theodor Adorno and Herbert Marcuse, intellectual giants, whose ideas about justice and liberation sharpened her political worldview. By the late 1960s, Davis had become deeply involved in activism. She joined the Communist Party USA and worked closely with the Black Panther Party, advocating for racial equality, gender justice, and economic reform. As a professor at UCLA, she quickly gained attention not just for her intellect, but also for her unapologetic politics. In 1969, then-Governor Ronald Reagan sought to have her barred from teaching because of her communist affiliation. But Davis stood firm, refusing to be intimidated, which only amplified her visibility and influence. Her life took a dramatic turn in 1970 when she was charged with aiding a failed attempt to free imprisoned Black Panther George Jackson. Though Davis denied direct involvement, her purchase of the firearms used in the incident linked her to the case. She went underground, landing on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list. Captured months later, she became a global symbol of resistance. After spending over a year in jail, she was acquitted of all charges in 1972. Her trial galvanized international support, with activists worldwide rallying under the slogan, "Free Angela." Would you have had the courage to maintain your convictions under the weight of such global scrutiny and personal risk? Davis continued her activism in the decades that followed, focusing on the prison industrial complex, systemic racism, and LGBTQ+ rights. Her book, Women, Race, and Class, 1981, broke new ground by showing how oppression operates at the intersections of race, gender, and class ideas that anticipated the framework of intersectionality before the term existed. Later works, such as Are Prisons Obsolete 2003, pushed readers to question whether incarceration truly delivers justice or simply perpetuates inequality. Although she faced constant backlash, Davis never wavered. She ran twice as the Communist Party's candidate for vice president in the 1980s and later became a respected scholar teaching at the University of California, Santa Cruz. She continued to publish extensively, deliver lectures, and speak on issues ranging from Palestine to climate justice, always insisting that struggles for liberation are interconnected. Now, in her 80s, Angela Davis remains an icon of radical thought and uncompromising resistance. Her life embodies the idea that true freedom requires challenging not only the obvious chains of racism, but also the subtler systemic structures that restrict human dignity. For Black queer activists and scholars, her work is particularly powerful because it affirms that identity cannot be divided. Liberation must embrace the whole self. Angela Davis's story is not simply about survival. It is about transformation of systems of thought and of possibility. She is living proof that when one refuses silence, even the harshest oppression cannot extinguish the fire of justice. Alice Walker. Alice Walker, born on February 9, 1944 in Eatonton, Georgia, grew up the daughter of sharecroppers in the segregated South. From childhood, she experienced the harsh realities of poverty and racial injustice, but she also discovered early on the power of words. At the age of 8, an accident with a BB gun left her blind in one eye, a traumatic event that made her withdraw from others. In her solitude, however, she developed a love for reading and writing that would blossom into one of the most powerful literary careers of the 20th century. After graduating from Sarah Lawrence College in 1965, Walker immersed herself in the civil rights movement, working alongside activists in Mississippi to register Black voters. This direct engagement with injustice shaped her worldview and her writing. In 1982, she published her most famous novel, The Color Purple, a groundbreaking story that explored race, gender, sexuality, and survival through the eyes of Celie, a poor Black woman in the early 20th century South. The book won the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction and the National Book Award, making Walker the first Black woman to win the Pulitzer. It sold millions of copies worldwide, and was later adapted into both a critically acclaimed 1985 film directed by Steven Spielberg and a Tony-winning Broadway musical. What set The Color Purple apart was its frank depiction of women's relationships, including same-sex love, at a time when such portrayals were rarely seen in mainstream literature. Walker herself has been open about her bisexuality, including her relationship with singer Tracy Chapman, and she infused her fiction with that same openness. Her work challenged readers to rethink love, sexuality, and power, while also celebrating resilience and spiritual awakening. Do you think literature has the power to change the way society views taboo subjects, or does it simply reflect changes already underway? Walker's contributions extend far beyond a single novel. She has published numerous collections of poetry and essays, such as In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, 1983, which celebrates the creativity and survival of Black women across generations. Her essays reveal her deep commitments to feminism, anti-racism, environmentalism, and human rights. She coined the term womanist to describe a Black feminist perspective rooted in the unique struggles and strengths of women of color. Her activism has been global in scope. Walker has spoken out against apartheid in South Africa, joined humanitarian efforts in Gaza, and consistently used her platform to support oppressed peoples around the world. She has also been candid about her personal struggles, including depression and heartbreak, ensuring that her image as a cultural icon remains grounded in authenticity. Despite controversies and criticisms over some of her political positions, Walker's voice continues to resonate. She has received countless honors, including induction into the California Hall of Fame and recognition from feminist and human rights organizations across the globe. Alice Walker's legacy is one of courage, creativity, and compassion. Through her novels, poems, and activism, she gave voice to those who had been silenced by oppression. She reminded the world that art is not just about beauty, it is about survival, truth, and transformation. Walker remains a guiding light for writers, activists, and readers seeking stories that heal and challenge in equal measure. Johnny Mathis. Johnny Mathis, born on September 30th, 1935 in Gilmer, Texas, and raised in San Francisco, is one of America's most enduring and beloved vocalists. With a career spanning more than 6 decades, Mathis has sold over 350 million records worldwide, placing him among the top-selling artists of all time. Known for his smooth tenor voice and impeccable phrasing, he mastered the art of the romantic ballad, delivering timeless hits like Chances Are Misty and It's Not For Me to Say. His music became the soundtrack of countless weddings, anniversaries, and love stories, earning him the nickname, the Voice of Romance. Mathis's rise to fame was rapid. After signing with Columbia Records in 1956, his first album made modest waves, but by 1958, his Greatest Hits collection was released, the first album ever called Greatest Hits, and it stayed on the Billboard charts for an astonishing 490 weeks. This record stood until the 1980s, when Pink Floyd's The Dark Side of the Moon finally surpassed it. His unparalleled consistency established him as a fixture in American popular music, transcending generations and musical trends. Yet behind the stardom, Mathis's personal life carried complexities. In 1982, during a rare candid interview, he mentioned that homosexuality was a way of life. "I've grown accustomed to a statement that was groundbreaking but risky at the time." Facing backlash, he later downplayed the remark, a reflection of the intense stigma surrounding queer identities in the entertainment industry of that era. Decades later, however, Mathis reaffirmed his truth, acknowledging his sexuality with the dignity and quiet confidence that had always defined him. Does knowing the hidden realities of an artist's life make their music resonate differently with you, especially when the songs are about love and longing? Despite the challenges of living as a gay man during a less accepting era, Mathis never allowed scandal or controversy to define him. Instead, he focused on his artistry, building a career of remarkable longevity. He performed for presidents, sang at the Academy Awards, and collaborated with artists ranging from Denise Williams to Barbra Streisand. His duet Too Much, Too Little, Too Late with Williams hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1978, proving that even after decades in the business, he could adapt to changing tastes while staying true to his style. Mathis's accolades are extensive. He has received 3 Grammy nominations, a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award, and induction into the Grammy Hall of Fame for several of his recordings. Beyond awards, his greatest achievement may be the sheer emotional connection his songs fostered, reminding audiences worldwide of love's power in all its forms. Now, in his late 80s, Johnny Mathis continues to perform, astonishing fans with both his vocal agility and his stamina. His life is a testament to resilience, talent, and quiet authenticity. While he kept parts of himself hidden for survival, his music never lied. It was always about love in its deepest and most universal sense. His voice remains as warm as ever, proof that some legacies are not just timeless, but eternal. Octavia E. Butler. Octavia Estelle Butler. Born on June 22, 1947 in Pasadena, California, grew up shy, introverted, and often felt out of place. Raised primarily by her mother after her father's death, Butler found comfort in books. As a child, she discovered science fiction, though the genre rarely included characters who looked like her. Determined to change that, she began writing her own stories at age 10, often waking before dawn to create before school. That discipline, along with her extraordinary imagination, would eventually make her one of the most important voices in modern literature. Butler's career took off in the 1970s, with the Patternist series, a set of novels exploring power, telepathy, and human evolution. But it was her 1979 novel Kindred that became her breakthrough masterpiece. In it, a young black woman is repeatedly transported back in time to a slave plantation, forced to grapple with the brutal realities of slavery and its impact on the present. The novel sold over 500,000 copies and remains a staple in classrooms, blending speculative fiction with African American history in a way no one had before. Works like Parable of the Sower, 1993, and Parable of the Talents, 1998, further cemented her reputation, eerily predicting social collapse, climate crisis, and the rise of authoritarianism decades before such issues dominated headlines. Butler's writing stood out because she centered black women, queer characters, and marginalized voices in a genre long dominated by white men. Her stories tackled themes of race, gender, sexuality, and power with unflinching honesty. She once said, "I write myself into the future so that I can survive it." In her universes, survival often came at a cost, but it also revealed resilience, adaptability, and the possibility of transformation. Do you think science fiction is merely an escape from reality, or is it one of the best tools we have for preparing for the future? Recognition soon followed. In 1995, Butler became the first science fiction writer to receive the MacArthur Genius Grant, a milestone that signaled her influence beyond genre fiction. She also won multiple Hugo and Nebula Awards, the highest honors in science fiction, making her one of the most decorated authors in the field. Despite her success, Butler remained humble, often describing herself as an observer rather than a celebrity. She struggled with depression and self-doubt, yet never stopped writing. Her persistence made her a mentor to countless young authors, particularly women and writers of color, who saw in her a model of what was possible. On February 24, 2006, Butler died unexpectedly at the age of 58, leaving behind an unfinished novel, but an enduring legacy. Since her passing, her works have only grown in prominence. Kindred was adapted into both a graphic novel and a television series, introducing her stories to new generations. Octavia E. Butler's life proves that science fiction is not just about aliens and faraway planets. It is about us. Through her visionary lens, she gave marginalized people a place in the future and reminded the world that imagining new realities is itself a radical act. She didn't just write stories, she rewrote what the future could be. Glenn Burke. Glenn Burke, born on November 16, 1952 in Oakland, California, seemed destined for greatness on the baseball field. Gifted with speed, agility, and a natural charisma, he quickly rose through the ranks of America's favorite pastime. By 1976, Burke had made his debut with the Los Angeles Dodgers, a franchise then brimming with talent. Known as a strong defensive outfielder and a lively presence in the clubhouse, he was embraced by teammates who appreciated both his skill and his personality. Yet beneath the cheers and the spotlight, Burke carried a truth that Major League Baseball was not ready to accept. He was a gay man. Burke's most lighthearted legacy is the invention of the high five. On October 2, 1977, during a Dodgers game, teammate Dusty Baker hit his 30th home run of the season. As Baker crossed home plate, Burke raised his hand and Baker slapped it. An iconic gesture was born. The high five would become a universal celebration across sports and culture, unknowingly tied to the joy and creativity of a man who lived authentically, even when it cost him dearly. While Burke's teammates largely accepted him, the Dodgers' management did not. Reports suggest the team even offered him money for a lavish honeymoon if he would marry a woman to quiet rumors. Burke refused, unwilling to compromise who he was. By 1978, he was traded to the Oakland Athletics, closer to his Bay Area roots, but further away from opportunity. Under manager Billy Martin, who openly used homophobic slurs, Burke's playing time dwindled. His major league career ended abruptly in 1979 after just 4 seasons. Do you believe professional sports have truly become more inclusive since Burke's time? Or do hidden barriers still exist for LGBTQ+ athletes today? After leaving baseball, Burke turned to amateur athletics, excelling in gay softball and basketball leagues, where he found both freedom and community. He later came out publicly in a 1982 interview with Inside Sports, making him the first former Major League Baseball player to do so. His 1995 autobiography, Out at Home. The Glenn Burke story, co-written with Eric Sherman, detailed his struggles with discrimination, the loneliness of hiding, and the relief of finally living openly. Sadly, Burke's post-baseball life was marred by hardship. He struggled financially, battled addiction, and contracted HIV in the 1980s, a diagnosis that at the time was heavily stigmatized. Despite this, he continued to speak out, becoming an advocate for both LGBTQ+ rights and HIV/AIDS awareness. His courage inspired a new generation of athletes to embrace their truth. On May 30th, 1995, Glenn Burke died from AIDS-related complications at just 42 years old. Recognition for Burke's contributions came late but meaningfully. In 2013, the Dodgers honored him at their annual LGBT night, acknowledging both his role in the team's history and his bravery as a pioneer. His story has since been celebrated in documentaries, books, and sports journalism, ensuring he is no longer forgotten. Glenn Burke's life is one of triumph and tragedy, but above all, it is a testament to integrity. He refused to live a lie even when it ended his career. He gave the world not only the high five, but also an example of unshakable authenticity. In a sport that often resisted change, Burke was years ahead of his time, an athlete who showed that victory is not just about the score, but about living your truth. Marlon Riggs. Marlon Troy Riggs, born on February 3, 1957 in Fort Worth, Texas, was a groundbreaking filmmaker, poet, and activist who used art to confront the silences around race and sexuality. His childhood was shaped by frequent moves. His family relocated often due to his father's military career, which left him both adaptable and observant. By the time Riggs attended Harvard University in the mid-1970s, he had already developed a keen eye for how culture shapes identity. After graduating in 1978, he pursued a master's degree in journalism at the University of California, Berkeley, where he discovered the power of film as a tool for social change. Riggs's career was defined by his refusal to separate art from activism. His 1989 documentary Tongues Untied combined spoken word performance and personal testimony to explore the lives of Black gay men. At a time when such subjects were rarely acknowledged, much less represented, Riggs created a work that was unapologetically bold. The film declared black men loving black men is the revolutionary act, a statement that resonated deeply within marginalized communities, but also drew fierce criticism from conservatives. Yet despite controversy, Tongues Untied was later added to the National Film Registry for its cultural significance. Riggs followed this with equally fearless works. Ethnic Notions, 1987 dissected racist stereotypes in American popular culture, while Color Adjustment, 1992, examined the portrayal of African Americans on television from the Civil Rights era through the 1980s. Both films won Emmy Awards and cemented Riggs's reputation as a scholar artist. But it was his openness about his identity as both a gay man and a person living with HIV that made his work revolutionary. Rather than allow stigma to silence him, Riggs turned the camera on himself and his community. Do you think art has the responsibility to challenge society, even if it risks backlash or censorship? His final film, Black Ain't 1995, completed posthumously, tackled the very question of who gets to define black identity. Through interviews, cultural analysis, and personal reflection, Riggs highlighted the ways sexism, homophobia, and class divisions fractured the black community, while urging unity in the face of oppression. The documentary was a fitting culmination of his life's work, provocative, challenging, and deeply human. Riggs's contributions earned him numerous awards, including a Peabody Emmys and recognition from film festivals worldwide. Yet his greatest achievement was creating a language of resistance through film blending academic rigor with artistic creativity. He also inspired countless students during his time as a professor at UC Berkeley's Graduate School of Journalism, where he emphasized the importance of authenticity in storytelling. Tragically, Riggs's life was cut short when he died of AIDS-related complications on April 5, 1994, at just 37 years old. Though his time was brief, his impact was seismic. His work continues to be taught in universities and screened in activist circles, reminding us of the power of visibility and truth. Marlon Riggs gave voice to a community long ignored, refusing to let silence define him or those like him. Through his camera, he transformed pain into poetry, invisibility into presence, and shame into pride. His legacy endures as both a mirror and a megaphone, reflecting reality and amplifying voices the world once tried to erase. Behind the glitter and applause, these 20 figures carried truths the world often refused to see. From James Baldwin's fearless words to Sylvester's unapologetic falsetto, from Angela Davis's fire for justice to RuPaul's global drag empire, each proved that identity and brilliance can never be separated. They remind us that visibility is power, and silence can be a prison. But here's the question for you. Do you believe society has truly embraced Black LGBTQ+ voices? Or are we still only scratching the surface? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned to Legends of Black Excellence.